Hello, welcome to episode 142 of the Book Binge, where this week we're doing another ranking video, sort of, and I guess technically a top 5 rather than a top 10, but this is another classics related one, but instead of being classics that I want to read, this is going to be classics that I meant to read last year, or to some degree kind of wanted to join for, but didn't. Over the last couple years, I have definitely been racking up quite the classics backlog between monthly classics read-alongs that I've been, unable to reach in time, so books that I've missed for that, skipped because of time reasons, or didn't really feel ready to read, or didn't have any interest in reading at all. Here are 5 of the classics I did want to read and meant to read in 2023, but didn't. First off, let's go for a couple of honorable mentions. The first one of those being a book that I did actually start on time in December, Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina. I'm just under halfway through, so I'm actually really behind on this one. I wasn't initially certain I was going to have time to try it, but I did get through a bit of it. I'm definitely going to try to get through this over the next couple months. By the time you're seeing this, I could potentially be done. Unlikely, but I could potentially be done by the time you're seeing this. Either way, this is one that I wanted to join, and I initially wasn't going to, but then I decided to join anyway and turned out not having time to finish it all the way, so it kind of fits in this list a little bit. Otherwise, it was going to be number 2 on this list, so I originally had to do some rearranging after I decided to start it anyway, but it is one that I have been enjoying, but one that I do need to make more time for. The other honorable mention is one that is definitely cheating because I never actually technically planned to join for this one, for one. But I did feel bad for missing the start of it. That is In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust. Like I said, I did feel bad for missing this one when they started it, as there were a lot of people to join for this read-along, and the first couple of entries were huge hits amongst everybody who read them. But I don't think I'll be ready for this until I'm a little bit older, in a few years, maybe upwards of a decade. We'll see, whenever I have the time and the active desire to I want to start that right now, because I can sort of feel it welling up in me right now, but not enough to just pick up the first book on a whim or anything like that. So, when I've had a little bit more life experience, I do plan to pick up In Search of Lost Time. And to be fair, I don't think anybody who actually did start reading this last year with that read-along has finished it yet either, so I can't feel too bad. But this was one that I did feel bad for not deciding to at least join on the first entry or two for so far, because, like I said, I have a couple friends who found those first couple books to be huge hits, both for many different reasons. But yeah, it's one that I definitely want to give a shot at some point in the future. Otherwise, number 5 on this list is actually one that I realize I don't own yet. Is on my wish list, but I don't own it yet. That being Dracula by Bram Stoker, which I realized pretty recently actually has a Penguin Deluxe Classic Edition, so I want to pick that version of it up at some point. I first noticed this book back in 7th or 8th grade because it was in my English teacher's classroom, and I had interest in it from that moment because the name Dracula kind of sticks out to people these days. I wonder why. This was going to be part of the October read-along, I think, the October Classics read-along book, but I definitely didn't have time for it in the midst of my Stephen Graham Jones binge, and there's also the fact that I don't think I realized that it was actually selected at that point, so I only realized it after the fact, therefore I missed it because I wasn't even paying enough attention, so that one is partially on me. Either way, I do want to get it back around to this one eventually, just, because it's kind of a legendary title, and because there's a reason Dracula is so big in the pop culture. Of course, a lot of that's because of films, but, that came from the book. So, Gone with the Wind is number 4 on that list by Margaret Mitchell. This was one I knew I was never going to be able to join because of time, because it and actually the next item on this list were marked in the same time for monthly classics for some reason, because whatever logistics reasons. Either way, this is one that I do definitely want to join. It's one that I want to read out of morbid curiosity more than anything, but I do want to try it, even if I don't have active interest in it, the same way that I do for a lot of other books. It's just kind of got that legendary air around it, both the book and the movie, so I do want to give it a try for that. Number 3 on the list is Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes, and this is one that, like I said, it was at the same time as Gone with the Wind for the classics, so I knew that I was only going to be able to read one or the other, and then it came around time to read this one, and I just didn't have time in the midst of a lot of other stuff, almost all of it relating to Sun Eater. So actually, I was planning to read this last year. This one, I was genuinely, I'm going to read that, and then I ended up not having the time to pick it up because it's so big. Otherwise, I was planning to read it over just those 2 months, read part 1, over July, and then part 2 in August was basically how I planned to do it, and then it didn't end up happening, but I do want to circle back around to this one eventually. It's one that I have great interest in. Number 2 on this list was actually the next classic to be read after Cervantes. This was for September read along. This was The Three Musketeers by, what's his name? Alexander Dumas, the guy who wrote Count of Monte Cristo. Of course, this book isn't quite as legendary as Count of Monte Cristo is, but I think it might be a little bit more well known in the public, popular culture, I guess, because of films and other stuff like that. I think more people would recognize the name Three Musketeers over, say, Monte Cristo. And of course, part of that might be because of the Three Musketeers candy, but even so, I think that Three Musketeers is slightly more well known. It is one that I do want to circle around to because, again, because of Sun Eater stuff, I was too busy working on some other stuff back here, doing proofreading and copy editing stuff for that when this book came around, so I didn't have time to fit in a 700 plus page, well, yeah, just under 700 page tome for it, so that was unfortunate for me. Number 1 on this list, you will definitely recognize from my recent top 10 classics I want to read video as being number 1 on that list. Wait, no, it was number 2 on that list. A Tale of Two Cities, one that I need to catch up on from July, I think, of 2022. Maybe it was August of 2022. So it's been over a year and a half, basically, since I was meant to join for this with the read-along and didn't, and haven't made time for it yet. It is by far the shortest entry on this list, so maybe that'll be the one that I actually end up making priority for first when I actually get to it. I skipped this actually not because it was too long at the time, whereas most of these I had to skip because of length. Instead, it was because this was a second book that was voted for in that same month for some reason. Both Picture of Dorian Gray, when that one got voted, people were like, well, I want a second book because it's short, and it's like, but why though? So, this one got voted at the same time. But either way, I'll get to this one soonish. I can't wait to work on more of Dickens's back catalog, and I want this to be my first full novel by him, partially because it is, known as being a little bit different even for his style. But either way, we'll see when I get to any of these. These are the ones that my friends basically read last year, or plenty of my friends read at one point or another over the last couple years, that I wanted to join but didn't have time for. And to be fair, Tale of Two Cities, like I said, was a read-along for 2022, but I also planned to read it in 2023 as sort of a read-along of my own, but I also ended up not making time for it then either. Either way, that was the bulk of this list, so thank you guys for watching. I'll be back next week with a review of Disquiet Gods by Christopher Ruocchio, a week ahead of its release, so I hope to see you guys in that video.